Hey, everybody, this is Area Code Batavia, a podcast about what it means to belong in Batavia, Illinois. I'm your host, Richard Clark. On today's episode, I talked to Josephine Tucci. Josephine became the executive director of the Batavia Public Library just 2 years ago. I wanted to talk to her about what she's learned about Batavia in those last 2 years. And in particular, I wanted to find out what role Batavia's library plays in this community. Here's my conversation with Josephine Tucci. Okay, I have to ask, what are you reading right now?
Ooh, what am I reading? Okay, I'm listening to Charles Dickens in my car, David Copperfield.
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah.
That's reading.
And then the book, I'm reading actually a biography on Daphne du Maurier.
Who's that?
She wrote Rebecca.
Okay.
And Jamaica Inn, which I just finished listening to that one. But I read Rebecca. I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
Because I love Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, me too.
And
I grew up watching Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Oh,
that show's incredible.
Yeah.
So
well, I
good.
love all his movies.
Yeah.
And Rebecca's one of my favorites. That and Rear Window and North by Northwest. Those are some stellar ones.
You know, I haven't seen any of those. It's like weird. It's like I haven't done the whole thing, but every time I watch Alfred Hitchcock, I'm like, that was incredible.
You need to watch his movies.
Yeah.
And you need to start with those three. I mean, he did a bunch when he was still living in England that are in black and white.
Okay.
And then when he moved to Hollywood, he started doing color films. And just also another really fun one is The Trouble with Harry. Have you seen that one? It's really good.
Nice.
Beautiful. It takes place in New England and it's in the fall and it's just gorgeous. And it's really silly and funny, but it's very good.
I like that. That's like, that's what I love about Alfred Hitchcock is he is silly and funny.
He has,
And also
and
all
the
other
Birds.
things.
The Birds is a good one.
Yeah.
That's by Daphne du Maurier.
Nice. Interesting. Cool. We are here in the Batavia Public Library. That's why we're having this conversation.
Yes, we are.
Can you tell me about this space and what it means to you?
Well, so the library has moved around a lot since it started. And this is a relatively new building. It's 23 years old, roughly, and it's a beautiful building. I think it really fits nicely with the landscape of Batavia.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I mean, all the limestone buildings, the history, it's so rich with history here in Batavia. And even though it's a newer building, it really blends in well with everything.
Yeah.
And that's very appealing. I think the residents really appreciate that and the staff really appreciate that. So I feel like it is a good reflection of Batavia and its history and its community.
What is, like, when you walk in, how do you feel? About the space.
I love it.
Yeah.
We want to do a renovation of the space because we haven't painted anything or done anything since it was built in 23 years ago. But the bones of the building are just so amazing. Yeah. And the space is nice and open. And we just kind of want to tweak it a little and make it as accessible and user-friendly for patrons as possible.
There's a lot of different, spaces in the space. I don't know how to say that. There's a lot of different vibes that you can choose from. Do you have a favorite of all of those?
Well, I love the window seats that we have. Okay. There's one in the stairwell.
Yeah.
And it's like this little hidden cubby. And then we have some also downstairs in the children's department. The quiet reading room is everybody's favorite.
Yeah,
the fireplace is amazing. And all the windows and the shape of it, it's just a really neat room. There's a lot of pockets in the library that I love. And the other one is, I have no sense of direction, but to the right of the adult services desk, there's a seating area where people go and they sit in the chairs. We have a knitting group that meets there.
Oh, that's cool.
And they all sit in kind of a circle and talk, and there's study tables there. And it feels like you're in somebody's a home library or in someone's, living room or something.
Someone's personal library, yeah.
And I think that's what makes this library unique and just so special is that it's a home away from home in a sense.
Yeah. You started at Batavia Public Library when?
It'll be 2 years next month.
2 years next month. And how has that gone?
It's going great.
Yeah. When was the first time you felt like you belonged in Batavia?
It was pretty fast.
Really?
So I do have a little bit of a history with Batavia in that my dad many, many years ago, who was a park district director, was the director of the Batavia Park District. I think he was the second or third one.
Yeah.
Since it started. So back in the 70s, he was the director of the Batavia Park District, but only for a brief time. And then he went on to Schaumburg, where he worked. He was at Schaumburg Park District for 27 years. So I already had that long distance, long ago connection with Batavia.
Yeah.
And
an awareness of a familiarity with. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember when I came here for my interview, when you live in Cook County and you work in Cook County and you've been there for years and years, it's a totally different feeling than coming out here to Kane County. And it's just lined with trees and green, and you feel like it's still part of the Chicago suburbs, but it's about as far out as you can get.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved the sort of small town feel that Batavia has, especially when you compare it to what I'm used to in Cook County.
Yeah. I lived in Wheaton for a while. And my observation about moving here is that it felt like you were in more of a town than a suburb, if that makes sense.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Like, I feel like the complaint I had about suburbs was, my observation was that people were kind of tourists of all the other towns. And so you never felt rooted in the community, because you would just go, like if you lived in Wheaton, you would just go to Glen Ellen. You would just go to, I'm trying to think of another place near there, Winfield or whatever, for various things. And I would always go to those places, but it meant that I wasn't like fundamentally invested in those things. But at least for me, and the vibe I get is that even among the Tri-Cities, which are pretty attached, people are largely spending time in their communities.
Right.
Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that if you live in St. Charles, or you live in Geneva, or you live in Batavia, you feel very rooted in that community.
Yeah.
But you appreciate your neighbors.
Yes.
And what the different things that your neighbors bring to the table. I mean, each community is very unique and different in their own right, with their own specialties and their own, really cool restaurants, really cool stores. They each have a very different library. I mean, so they complement each other, but they still maintain their identity.
Yeah. I go to the St. Charles Library, I think, for board games. That's
you do?
my thing. And then I come here for everything else,
Well, we're going to be increasing our board game collection.
I'm so happy to hear that. You're taking my advice from the survey. That was the big thing I put on the survey. It was like more board games.
That's right.
That's cool. You guys do great with video games, which we do that a lot too.
Right. But, we're also going to be increasing our video games. That's one of our goals.
Nice. Awesome. So you mentioned you felt like you belonged pretty quickly.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
I think it was getting to know the community better by talking with people, talking with the staff, because a lot of our staff live in Batavia.
Yeah.
I would say maybe half of our staff at least live in Batavia. Getting to know the board and getting out there, visiting different businesses and community organizations in Batavia. Was there
a specific moment that stands out where you were like, oh man, I think I belong here?
Well, this is a little side thing.
Yeah.
When I came out to interview, as I was driving out of the parking lot on my final interview, there was a turkey vulture in the parking lot. And I was like, wow, that's so cool,
Yeah.
And I thought I could live here or I could work here.
Because of the turkey vulture?
Yeah, because it was such a cool, a bird.
It was just like a cool thing?
Yeah. I'm not going to see that in Park Ridge.
Have you seen one since? Because I don't see turkey vultures a lot.
I have. Okay. Yes, I have.
Got it.
I've seen lots of really cool wildlife since I've moved out here.
We got eagles flying around and stuff, which is
I have not seen, you mean like what kind of eagle?
I saw a bald eagle.
I heard there was a bald eagle somewhere. I thought it was like near Carroll Stream or something.
Oh, I don't know. But I saw one over near my house. A guy said, look, a bald eagle. And I looked up and I was like, wow.
I'm surprised. I have not seen a bald eagle. I've seen lots of...
Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Who knows? I'm not an expert on these things.
It was a bird with a bag on its head.
Yeah. Right.
No, so that was, I mean, believe it or not, that really stuck with me. This turkey vulture, and I was like, that is just so bizarre and cool. But then once I was working here, I would say, like, I love looking out my office window, and because we're kind of up on a hill, and looking out over all those buildings and all the limestone, and just, I mean, I feel like it's almost like this feels almost like a vacation spot, because it's so different from what I was used to in Cook County.
Yeah.
And I love the rolling hills and the farmland that surrounds the area. So I really fell in love with the landscape.
It's interesting to me that like so many people, when I ask that question, talk about something someone did for them or an interaction they had, a relationship. But what's really interesting to me is just throughout this interview so far, you've talked a lot about nature and landscape and stuff like that, which is fascinating. I mean, you've got like this picture of the Fox River, the Challenge Center up on your wall. You're clearly like a nature person, or at least like a landscape aesthetic person, I guess.
I think I was craving that in my life. And so this was such a lovely transition for me in my life.
Yeah.
I just love living out here.
You came here from where?
So before I moved here, I lived in Park Ridge, and I worked in Lincolnwood, which, is in between Skokie and Chicago.
Okay, yeah.
And, there were forest preserves nearby and everything, but it's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. And before that, I was in Oak Park, and I worked at the Berwyn Public Library.
Got it.
So very urban.
Yep.
Chicago is a hop, jump, and a skip away on train or by car, which had its benefits, and was great. But I was really craving a totally different landscape.
Yeah, and some of that transition sort of represents like space.
Yes.
Just like actual space to exist and breathe a little bit.
Right.
Whereas, those places really are about being surrounded by people.
People
for better or worse.
And strip malls and traffic.
Strip malls are the worst. Can we all agree?
Because that's what connects all those communities is you have to go through these main roads and it's like, here's another strip mall.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I'm in Wheaton. Here's another strip mall.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm in Glen Ellen. And you don't feel the transition because it all looks the same.
That makes total sense. Can you talk about the moment you decided to go into, I don't know how to say this, working in the library, to like, it's not the library industry. It's like, how would you say that? You started...
Well, so...
I assume it started with you wanting to be like a librarian or something, right?
No.
Okay.
It did not.
Interesting.
Well, so when I got a bachelor's degree in English literature from the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Okay.
Then I moved, after like a couple of years, just hanging out in Madison, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I lived there for 7 years. And while I was in D.C., I was surrounded by all these amazing museums. Actually, to back up a little bit, I worked as an editor at an art museum, which was called the Elvia Museum of Art, and now it has a totally different name in Madison. And I worked as an editor there. I moved out to D.C., just starting completely from scratch, starting over when I was 23. Didn't know anybody. My sister lived in the suburbs, but I was in the city. And I gradually just worked whatever I could to pay the rent. And then I ended up doing a temporary job at an offshoot of the Smithsonian Institute.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything in a museum. Then I got a job, but I knew I wanted to be in museums. Then I got a job at the Textile Museum, which is no longer in DC. It's part of George Washington University. Okay. But it was in this old mansion right on DuPont Circle. I think for me, the job, what I do is really important, but it's also the space is really important because it was an old mansion that people had lived in. It was a home, and they had turned it into this museum. So there was one wing was exhibition space, another was staff space, and I had an office that was like in the old linen. It was a huge linen closet type thing, and that was my office with fireplaces, in all the rooms. And there were about 30 staff, and I worked there for about 3 years and decided I wanted to go to grad school. So I got my master's. My first master's was in museum education.
Oh, nice.
And then once I finished my degree in museum education, I went and worked at the National Cathedral in this, it was called the Medieval Workshop. And so we had all these different stations where you could try your hand at being carving out of limestone. Yeah. Usually it was kids with mallets just pounding away on it, but it gave them an idea of what it was like to use the tools. We had a stained glass window table. We did these etchings off of, when you go to a graveyard, you do a rubbing. We had rubbings, but they weren't gravestones. And we had other different stations that were common in the Middle Ages about building cathedrals and just the artisan professions of the Middle Ages. So I ran that workshop, and we had school groups come in and et cetera.
Yeah.
And then I got married, and my husband wanted to go get his master's in architecture. So we came to Chicago. And because this is the place to be for architecture.
Yeah, no kidding.
So we left DC, came to Chicago, and then I worked at the Art Institute of Chicago for 3 years in their education department. And then I worked at Shedd Aquarium for almost 2 years. But while I was at Shedd, I got pregnant with triplets.
Whoa.
And so...
That'll blow up your life a little bit.
That totally blew up my life.
Yeah.
But after the boys were born, I realized the cost of childcare and just how difficult that would be to work full time and have 3 babies. So I ended up leaving the Shedd and staying home with the boys. And at that time, we moved from the city to Berwyn, bought a house, and for the first year, I stayed home with the boys, but I would take them to our local library all the time in the 3-baby stroller, and we'd walk from our house to the library. Yeah. And I just got to talking to the staff, and the woman who was in charge of the adult services department asked me if I wanted a part-time job working in the adult services department. And
can I ask, like, when you left your job at the Shedd Aquarium and became a stay-at-home mom, how did that feel?
I don't remember. No.
100%. Yeah.
Well, it was hard. You know, I worked really hard to get that degree, and I loved working in museums, and I loved the Shedd. It was a great place to work.
You were on like such an insane career track in that moment. Like, my thought was you had a series of jobs I am actively jealous of. Like, every time I go to a museum, I even wrote down like editor at a museum. Like, that's a thing. That would be my ideal. Yeah. That sounds incredible.
It was, but it wasn't sustainable because, I mean, museum at the time, the salaries were very low. Yeah. And while my husband was in grad school, I was the sole supporter of our family. Okay. And my salary was really low, but it's a sacrifice. You have this love for what the museum does and represents and being a part of that, but it comes at a little bit of a price because it's very difficult to support yourself.
Totally.
Unless you start to really move up. Yeah. And I was still just fairly early in my career. Yeah. So it was hard to leave that. I really missed it. But commuting and all that, I did not want to. I just knew I couldn't do that with 3 babies. Yeah. So after about a year, I started working Saturdays at my local library. And it was a really easy transition. Libraries and museums have a lot in common. Yeah. You know, they collect things, materials that they share with people. And it's about learning and exploring and understanding everything in the world. Yeah. And so it was an easy transition for me. Plus, I'd been an English major, so I'd done a lot of reading and classics as well as, newer, more contemporary titles. And so it was a very easy switch. And I just kept working there part-time. I think I was 2 days a week eventually. When my boys were 4, I had a daughter, which was a surprise. And but I kept working part-time while she was a baby. Eventually, when she was just not quite 5, so she was at the end of preschool, she was 4, a full-time position became available in their outreach department to be the head of the outreach department. And so I applied for that and took it. And then after that, it just kept growing. And then I knew that this was a place that I could really make a lifetime, a career in for the rest of my life. So I worked in outreach for many years and loved it.
Did you come to a point where you were like, I think not that you don't want to go to museums, but that you would be happy just focusing on libraries?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So you preferred it? You prefer libraries over working in museums? Well, the thing
about libraries is that there's a lot more libraries than there are museums.
Yes.
And even though there's smaller museums, outside of Chicago, the really big ones where there's room for growth and, amazing collections. Those are all in the city. And I just didn't want to have to do that commute with small children.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
We were so lucky here in Illinois. We have this amazing library system in the state of Illinois. And almost every community has a library, or at least they share one with another neighboring community, and they're just rich with materials and resources and services.
Yeah.
So I did mourn that a little bit, that transition, because it was different, but it was similar. But then I realized just how much libraries have to offer, and it wasn't that hard then to just dive right in.
Right. When you started here in Batavia as the director, how did you expect that to pan out?
Well, I knew they wanted to do a renovation project. I knew that the previous director had been here for 18 years, almost the entire time they were in this building. And so it was going to be a big change for the staff and the community to have somebody new on board.
Yeah.
And I got to know the staff and the community, and I saw where there was need for just kind of changing some things, updating some things. And so the last 2 years, the staff and I have really been working towards getting ready for this renovation project, because you can't just suddenly wake up one morning and say, okay, we're going to renovate the inside of this building. You have to, it takes a lot of thought and planning before you even start designing what it's going to look like. That's what we've been doing for the last 2 years is, what does this mean for our services, the collection, the staff? What do we need to do to prepare for this big renovation? So that's what we've been focusing on.
Nice. One of the things, the tensions that I feel, and that you mentioned, like, you're getting more board games, you're getting more video games. When I walk into a library, I'm always shocked that they have, I'm just going to like colloquially say, fun stuff. I know other things are fun, but you know what I'm saying. You have like kind of entertainment, almost escapism even. Yeah. And then you have like the enrichment, the more focused on enrichment things. And I'm a media person. I love art. I love entertainment. I was a critic in my past life. And so I love all of these things and I see value in all of these things, obviously. But I'm interested in, like, when you have limited resources, you have to prioritize.
Yeah.
And so there's a tension, right, between what are we focusing on? What are we expanding on? How do you think about that when you're thinking about, okay, we need more, people are asking for more board games, but also like literature is good. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of things.
You do have to balance it. And libraries are constantly evolving and changing. And those changes are based on what their community needs. And funding, et cetera. And that's why we just finished our strategic plan. A big part of creating the strategic plan is getting feedback from the community, the different partners in the city, et cetera. And so that feedback is so important because it helps us have a plan, a direction for 3 to 5 years. And every library is different. And it's like you go to Geneva and it's a very different vibe than here at Batavia. And that's fine. So they're not going to all look like each other. They're not going to have the same materials or resources available. And when I worked at Berwyn, we did a lot with ESL and immigration and stuff like that. And that's just not something that Batavia really needs to expand on to that extent. So every community is going to have a different feel. And I think what I've noticed here is just how important history is and how much it's valued by the residents. But people who have lived in Batavia their whole lives, or even most of their lives, feel very proud of its history and what it's done. And, you know, just they love the limestone, they love the buildings, they love the houses, they love the quarry, all of these things. And they feel there's such a strong sense of identity with Batavia as a city. That resonates a lot with me as someone who's done a lot of these interviews. The answer to the question, like even you, with the answer to the question of describe this space and what it's always a historical answer. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to. No.
Almost every single time they're like, well, this used to be this and then it was this and so and so. And so I think that's probably why the mayor keeps winning, or part of the reason the mayor is so popular here is because he is fundamentally like a historical dude. Yes, he's the historian of Batavia. That's right. That resonates with me a lot. How does that play out in how you make decisions at the library? Well, you know, when we think about this renovation project, it definitely influenced kind of how we want to approach it. Don't want to like gut this building and then turn it into this brightly colored, really super
modern. Right. It doesn't fit with the community. And we actively partner with the Depot Museum and the Batavia Historical Society and the City of Batavia and the Park District. And so by communicating with all these different entities, it's like in the background all the time, the history and the tradition, but still providing new services and, updating things, but without losing that identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's every group I've ever worked with since I've been here has that kind of in the back of their mind.
It's the part of the mindset.
We want growth, but we don't want to change the core.
That is the fundamental. Yeah. Every conversation around what should happen is growth, but not changing things.
Yeah. You don't want to suddenly not recognize Batavia anymore.
Right.
Because it's just completely outgrown. It's who it really is at the core.
Yes. Did you ever feel like a feeling of doubt or hesitation, like like a hard time when you were like, oh, maybe this is not the right thing for me?
No, never.
Okay.
I really didn't.
Have you had hard things come up?
Oh, sure.
What's your attitude towards those things?
What doesn't break you makes you stronger.
Sure, yeah.
I have to say that there's been challenges here, but nothing. I mean, when I was at Lincolnwood Public Library, we had so many book challenges and we had really horrible board meetings with the public being there. And it got really ugly. And it was in the news and it was really unpleasant.
Just people saying these things shouldn't be in the library or whatever. What's your attitude towards that?
That the library is for everyone.
Yeah.
And that we have materials. We have so many different types of materials here.
Yeah.
And some people may want to read this, or one person wants to read this, and another person wants to read this, and they don't have to want to read the same things.
Right.
It's all about a personal choice.
Yeah.
We try to provide as many types of resources and topics and themes and authors, that appeal to people. But we know that not everything here is for everyone. And that's exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah.
That's what libraries do, is they provide access to information, and not everybody wants the same information.
Is it your experience that Batavia is pretty open to that approach?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
Good. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So you've been a director of libraries for how long?
Right. So
is it executive director?
Well, here, I mean, every library has a
different
title.
Okay.
Yeah, like library director, executive
Let me ask
director.
it this way. You've been leading libraries for how long?
Over 5 years.
Okay. What has that role and being in that role in various contexts taught you about yourself?
Wow. That I'm good at this job. When I worked in museums, I always had this long-term goal of I'd like to be the director of a museum. When I started working in libraries, I was so focused on my kids, I wasn't thinking too much about but once I was working full-time and in outreach, I realized unless I get that library science degree, I'm going to be stuck, because to move up in the library world, you have to have the library science degree, master's. So I ended up going back to school and getting a second master's in library science.
Wow, yeah.
And I think I did that when I had 4 kids at home, and it was very challenging. I think that's what I've learned is I'm very good at facing challenges. Because life is filled with them. And sometimes there's more challenges than you want to.
Because you had 3 kids at once.
Yes, I did.
I mean, that's a pretty big challenge. I think it's great, but it's
I could say that having those 3 boys is what prepared me for the rest of my life.
It's hard to imagine a harder thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure I take that back. I can imagine harder things, but that's hard.
It was very hard. Yeah. Because I pretty much did it all on my own,
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of help.
Yep. You didn't have family around and stuff like that?
No.
Yeah.
I didn't.
What has being in Batavia taught you about yourself?
That you don't have to live in a big city to have a really rich and culturally diverse and interesting life.
Yeah.
And I think also being out here has just taught me a lot about it's important to have challenges in your life so that you continue to grow, but also to be able to appreciate the peace in life and the tranquility in life. And I've been able to do that a lot more since I've moved out here than I ever was able to do.
Batavia has kind of represented that.
Yeah, but I think also just the Fox River area too. This came at a perfect time in my life where I really needed this space. And where we live, there's lots of woods, lots of wildlife. And I really was craving that in my life.
I don't think a lot of people appreciate that. Could you talk about like the value of that kind of peace?
I think as it takes you out of the rush, so focused on buying this, going there, getting that. I mean, there's still that in my life, of course. Yeah. But I'm starting to appreciate, and I share this with Kristen, just the love of birds. I see so many interesting birds in my backyard, and I'm trying every day. I'm like, I got to fill the bird feeder again. They're ravenous. Yeah. I was volunteering for a while at a horse sanctuary. I couldn't do that where I used to live. Yeah. So there's like a whole new set of opportunities out here that I just wouldn't have had easy access to where I was before. But in Batavia, I mean, I love all the little, first of all, the boardwalk, the little shops is just the coolest idea.
Yeah, I love it.
And I went to the quarry and I was like, what an interesting, unique place to go swimming. Yeah. I mean, you don't feel like and it's all surrounded by trees, it's like it's just magical. And those little treats that Batavia offers are just really enriching in your life.
Yeah, I love that.
Although I have to say, I know a lot of our small businesses are struggling, and I don't know what the answer is because it's a uncertain time. Yeah, but they're really struggling. And I'm on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, Batavia Chamber of Commerce, and one of the things I want to explore is what can the library do to help these small businesses? I mean, we provide databases where, if they need to do research or whatever that are geared towards businesses, we do have resources here, but what more can we do to help them? And part of it, I think, is just getting the word out that they're there. Yep. Go visit them, give them your patronage, because libraries build strong communities, but so does everything else in the community. Those small businesses, the park district, the city, the schools, everybody builds that strong community. So when you have these weak points, it weakens the whole structure, and you just want to do everything you can to sustain it and make it stronger.
I like that. I've been thinking in the same direction. I think a lot of people have. And one of the things that's cool is there's a feeling of like mobilization happening. I think a lot of people are like, I am thinking about what to do. I'm not sure what it would look like. And that's kind of where I'm at. But like, there's this feeling of something. We got to do something to help, these businesses. But it's tricky because
it is tricky.
As opposed to things like the library, they don't rely on the relatively stable public funding thing that they rely on, really just like sort of fickle public, like me and you deciding to go there. Right. Which is, I can't think of a less stable. I mean, just on an individual level, me deciding to go to anywhere, much less one place or another, it's very hard to rely on that. Right. And to set up a structure where you can rely on that.
Right. And also when finances get tough, if inflation goes up and if we do enter into a recession, the first thing that people cut are those extras that enrich our lives, but don't necessarily feed our lives the way food and shelter does. So those things get easily cut out, but they're so important.
Yep. Talking about peace, I mean, one of the core ingredients of peace is stability. And I think that's maybe why when I walk into a library, this library in particular, I feel a calmness that I don't feel necessarily in other places, because it's like, it's just here. It's just like a stable structure. It's like a consistent presence in the community. It doesn't change super quickly. Like things are not randomly changing all the time. Yeah, it's comforting and peaceful in that way, I think, which is good.
So we want to maintain that, but we want to update things. Communities and libraries, they still need to grow. They still need to evolve, but that doesn't mean they have to change who they are,
or
what they are.
I mean, the downside to not changing is all of a sudden it seems like change because it feels old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that is the downside is like you restrict change for long enough. All of a sudden you're like walking over a bridge and you're like, oh, this is a little nerve wracking because it is so old. And I think that's the danger. So I think it's smart to do that kind of thing. What keeps you up at night?
My kids, worrying about my kids.
How old are they now?
So my boys just turned 25.
Okay.
And my daughter is 21 today.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And this thing about being a parent is never stop worrying about your kids. Yeah. They could be, I could be 105 and they could be 70 and I'd still worry about them.
Yeah, totally.
And you're never as happy as your unhappiest kid.
Yeah.
So when one of them is going through a rough time, it hits me to the core.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. What about with your role? What keeps you up at night?
But being you mean the director of the library?
Yeah.
When I have a really early meeting and I'm afraid I'm going to oversleep, and then I think, oh God, I got to make sure I get up because I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I think the work that I'm doing here, I find so rewarding that it doesn't, I mean, I get stressed. Everybody gets stressed, but it's not the kind of stress that would keep me up at night because I feel like what we're doing here is good and makes sense and is solid. And, I've got a great staff, really great management team. And it's such a breath of fresh air to have that all in place and feel like as a team, we are facing any challenges that come up.
Yeah.
We really work together. We're very collaborative here at the library.
Yeah.
And when you have that support and that team kind of mentality, then it takes a lot of the stress away because you know that they have my back, I have their back, and so you just face those storms together.
Yeah.
And we haven't had a lot of storms.
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
What in your mind does it mean to belong in Batavia?
I think to belong in Batavia is to appreciate Batavia and to value what the community offers and I think to belong in Batavia, you need to get involved in Batavia. And it's not just a place, it's not just your address. It's also volunteer, join the Rotary Club, join the chamber. Well, if you're a small business or any business, join the chamber, join the Friends of the Library, get involved because you gain knowledge of your community in a different way the more involved you are. You feel investment and you are part of strengthening it when you get involved. You can strengthen it and help and just make it a really appealing place to live and belong to.
Yeah. How does something like the Friends of the Library affect the mission of a library, but also like you day by day? How does it affect your feeling about the work you're doing?
Well, the Friends, they offer book sales throughout the week and month, year. And they're donated books, used books. Sometimes they're discards from the library. They fundraise for the library through these book sales. And they have been so amazing in supporting the library. I mean, they're always saying, what can we do? What can we do? How can we support the library? Yeah. And so we're always trying to come up with ways that they can support us through these financial means, but that also is recognized by the community we don't want them to just like buy a desk, for somebody's office. Yeah. We want their resources to go to something that is definitely community facing and benefits the community. And they've just been so supportive and easy to work with. And not all libraries have a really strong friends group. Some of them really struggle to get anybody to get involved. We have a very strong friends group. We have a very strong board for the library in general. And nobody's bringing like a personal agenda. It's all about the library. We're here for the library, for the community. And that doesn't happen everywhere. Yeah. Batavia is really unique, I think, in that when people get involved, it's because they want to make Batavia a great place to live. Yeah. And it's not just because they want power or perks or whatever. Right. It's really about Batavia.
In your mind, what is the role of the library in helping people belong in Batavia?
anytime I've moved to a new community, the first thing I do is get a library card. And so, I mean, because it's one of the few free resources out there anymore, I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to get a library card, and it can open a world to you.
Yeah.
Whether it's just reading for pleasure or getting information to help your business or to help you with, your kids, or my dog is sick, I need to figure out why. We have so many resources that can enrich your life and give you information to help you navigate life.
Yeah.
We also have lots of programs and services. We do notary services here. We don't charge for them. We have programs for all ages, whether it's craft related or, how to understand retirement or Social Security, or we do book deliveries. I mean, we just really try to enrich people's lives through these resources because it's their property taxes that pay for us. Mm-hmm. And we want to use those taxes in the best way possible. And the best way to use them is to put them back, give them back to the community through our services and resources.
Yeah. There's something really nice when you're in the library with other people so when you go shopping,
I hate shopping.
The thing that you go to a bookstore, for instance, which are great.
That's the only shopping I like to do.
Keep local bookstores alive. We want to do that. But the fundamental thing that's really at the top of your mind is how much money do I have to spend?
Yeah.
Like that is the amount of resources you have.
Right.
And I like that when you go in the library, you are on the same playing field, equal footing with anyone else who's in there.
Right.
And that's a kind of belonging. It's equitable, right?
Yes.
There's a feeling that you're all...
Everybody has equal access to everything we have here.
Yeah. That's like, I got goosebumps a little bit because that's like a profound feeling of belonging when you can walk into a place and you feel like no matter who I am, no matter what you do or are, you can access all of the same things as this billionaire over here.
Right. I mean, you don't even have to have a library card to use the library.
You just walk in.
You just walk in.
Yeah.
And you can still use the internet. You can still look at our books. You can still, sign up for a program.
Yeah.
So there is something for everyone here.
I always start these conversations with a question about the space we're in. It turns out Josephine is fundamentally passionate about spaces. She expresses her feelings about Batavia in terms of landscape, and she largely frames her life story in terms of where she lived and the spaces in which she works. Physical space matters beyond just vibes and aesthetics. Physical spaces create opportunities. The question is, for whom and for what? I think this is what makes Josephine such a great fit for the library. A library, first and foremost, is meant to create opportunities for everyone, where people can feel welcome, better themselves, and feel as if they belong and are engaged with their community. It's a heavy responsibility and a tall order, one that requires an incredibly well thought out and intentional physical space. I was reminded in this conversation of how buildings, landscape, and infrastructure can directly contribute to our sense of community and belonging. Not all places are created with this in mind, but maybe they should be. Thanks for listening to Area Code Batavia. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, you should absolutely subscribe to the newsletter. Just click the link in the show notes. Most importantly, if you know someone who would love to hear this podcast, please share it with them. Word of mouth is the best way to grow our community and help more people feel like they belong in Batavia, Illinois. Area Code Batavia is produced by Area Code Audio. It's hosted and produced by me, Richard Clark, with additional production help from Jennifer Clark. Edited and mixed by Matt Linder.